Today, on the podcast, I want to talk about something that a lot of people tend to struggle with, especially new businesses that are entering the market, and that is pricing. Now, there are two components to pricing. The first one is a functional, analytical, and detailed component where there's some calculations that take place, where there's a bit of research that take place. And the second component is the emotional component to pricing. Now, we'll talk about the emotional component in the second half of today's episode, but let's talk about the functional side of pricing very quickly. So if you are offering a service or if you are selling a product, right? Back in high school, we were taught two methods of pricing. The first method is called cost plus, and the second method is called differentiation. Now, cost plus is where you calculate exactly what it costs you. So let's say you make burgers, right? There's only one variant of burger. You only use one type of roll, you use one type of meat. So let's say for the purpose of simplicity, your costing is the same for every single burger that you are making because it's only one variant. And let's say it costs you 25 Rand. Okay, a cost plus method is recognizing what your cost is, and that would be your direct cost that goes into it. Then also understanding what are the extra costs that goes into it. So this could be your fixed costs, like the staff that you have to pay on a monthly basis, and then you also have to determine how many of these burgers must be sold in order for you to get to a comfortable margin, and that is called break-even analysis. But we'll leave that topic for the financial management show. But then once you've calculated exactly what it will cost you, and it doesn't have to be an exact amount at this point, but if you know it costs you in the range of 25 to 35 Rand per burger, you now know that you need to put a markup on that so that your business can be in a state of profit or it can be positive, right? And once you've done that, then you'll have to look at what is the market dictating, okay? If you compare your burger to your competitors and you see that they're selling it for 70 bucks and you've gone into 50, you've now decided to undercut your competitors in an attempt to steal some of their market share. Now, there are pros and cons to cutting your costs or to dropping your prices. And by doing that, yes, you could attract a cost-sensitive or price-sensitive community, but then you're going to be stuck there because as soon as you increase it slightly, a lot of these customers will start complaining. They will say, listen, the reason we started coming to you and supporting your business is because you are slightly cheaper than your competitors. And now you're increasing. And a lot of the time it's not even logical because your increase might be so minimal that it still comes in lower than what your competitors are charging, but because that is a clientele that you've now attracted, you've positioned yourself in that market, and it makes it extremely difficult for you to do something a little more premium. So keep that in mind. The other part of this is the differentiation strategy. Now, if you launch their product, you understand what your costing is. Let's say your costing is 35 Rand, but you decide to go up at 90 Rand from a selling perspective. You feel that 90 Rand is good because you offer something unique. You have a very good, unique selling proposition. It might be the way in which you fry the burgers. It might be the way in which you market the business, whether you're using social media influencers, whether you're using other forms of marketing to really get attention. Or it could be that you have a secret sauce that nobody knows. I'm thinking of a movie I saw many years ago called Good Burger with Keenan and Kel. And I remember it was a struggling burger joint. And they just couldn't get over until Kel, who was this kind of nerdy like guy that didn't have much going for him until he developed the sauce, and this sauce was the winner. It was the secret ingredient to their success. And if you don't have some sort of secret ingredient, it doesn't have to be the sauce that Cal made. It could be the way in which you do marketing. It could be your customer service. It could be the atmosphere that is in your restaurant or your establishment. When people come in there, they could say, wow, there's something about this place. You know, whatever your secret sauce is, whatever that formula is, you need to market that and get people to come because this is something you offer that your competitors cannot offer. And not only can they not offer it, they cannot replicate because not only were you the pioneer of it, but you've perfected it to a point where you've raised the barriers to entry. So other people that are looking to follow you cannot do that, or they cannot do that at the level that you can now do that. So that is what we call either a cost plus way of determining price or a differentiation way. Now, from a differentiation perspective, right, this is also where we're playing on the other component of the pricing strategy. Now, the other component of the pricing strategy is more of a psychological approach. And I'm thinking of a guy like Vusi Thembekwayo, for example. He publicly stated that he charges 4 times more than the other speakers that are in the same area as he is. And when I say area, I'm not talking about geographical area. I'm talking about the speaking arena. Now, there are other speakers that also do something to what he's trying to do. There are other speakers that are also offering, whether it's business talks, whether it's motivational talks, whether it is workshops, and he charges 4 times more. And he's positioned himself that way so that his perceived value is far higher. Now, whether it is actually higher, that might be a secondary conversation. But he is very cleverly and very strategically positioned himself and his brand to be that of, I am the best speaker, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in Africa, however he has positioned himself, and he has priced himself according to that perceived value. Now, if you are new on the market and you're trying to do something like this, yes, you might cause a bit of curiosity. People might look into your profile, they might go onto your website, but if you don't have a system that tracks the people's curiosity, if you don't have something if you don't have substance that reels them in, that gets them thinking, okay, there must be something to him because I'm seeing this reference point, I'm seeing what he's done for that company, I've seen what he's done here, so maybe there's something to this. And a lot of the time, what people are now doing is they're not just buying from you, they tend to follow you a little bit first. Whether it's on your social media platforms, whether it's coming to your events, whether it's coming to your talks, whatever it is you are doing. Never, in my experience, does someone just look at you once and say, okay, I'm going to buy from you. There's usually 7 to 15 points of contact that takes place first. And once that 7 to 15 points of contact constantly happens, and customers now feel that there's this level of consistency, there's level of reliability, there's this level of trust, and there's this level of, okay, this guy knows what he's doing, now I will start buying from you. If you can't prove that level of consistency over a prolonged period of time, they might, and it's the smallest thing that you might say no to or that you might say yes to, that creates a bit of confusion, that causes a bit of conflict in the mind of the customer that says, I liked him, but I didn't like the way he phrased that statement, or he didn't put that sentence the way I know he would usually do that, or my perceived version of how someone of high value should put something like that together. So that could cause him to say, no, it's fine. Sometimes it's as small as the dress code. So if it's a person that is of influence, let's say he's in the faith space or in the Christian space, and he's dressed a little bit out there, someone might feel, that's a bit of a letdown. And I was thinking of attending this person's church or going to that person's seminar, but just based on the way they're now dressed, or based on who they might be associated to, or based on the fact that they are friends with that person, that is a little bit controversial. Those are all contributing factors to what might say, okay, no, you know what? He's done all the right things up until then. It's a no for me. And this is the psychology of sales. This is the psychology of business, and especially pricing. Now, the other component that most people struggle with is, okay, I know what it costs me. I know what my competitors are selling at. I have somewhat of a unique selling proposition, but it is easily replicatable. How do I then price? Okay. And when people are in a state of, okay, cool, how do I go about doing this? There are 2 models you can use. The one, again, we're going back to high school or we're going back to university, and we're going to talk about the pricing quadrants and what type of clientele you're looking at attracting. And then the second one is a little more behavioral based. Now, let's look at the pricing quadrants for a second. If you are offering something that is low quality and you want to sell it at a low price, that is the dumping quadrant. Now, again, over here, if you have let's say it's a price sensitive community and you want to sell in volume, you want to sell at scale, you know that what you're selling is not a quality product and you're not positioning it as that, then you might sell a little bit of that, but you are aware of the bracket and the quadrant that you are selling in. So if you're going to Mr. Price, as an example, and you're buying a pair of jeans that costs $80, you know that it is not a high quality jeans. It is not made with the best of materials and made with precision craftsmanship. You know that the jeans might only last for 6 months, maybe a year, if you are lucky. And that is okay. You've made peace with that because you're only paying $80. On the other extreme, it might be high price for a high premium audience. So it's high price and high quality. That is a premium product that you're selling. So if you buy a Louis Vuitton bag, it might cost you 250,000 Rand, but you understand that the craftsmanship that goes into that is extremely high. You know that the quality of the leather that is being used comes from the best of animals, and you know that the brand that is attached to that bag is also a statement of that quality. Now, what happens if you have a high quality product, but you are looking at selling it at a lower cost? That is called penetration. So if you're new to the market, right, and you want to cut into your competitors' market share, and you feel that, yes, my product is worth $1,000, but I'm going to sell it at $800, which is 20% less than what it's actually worth, in an attempt to increase my market share. And once I have enough customers in my pipeline, I can start upping my price. So it's kind of a short-term hit for long-term gain. That works in some instances. One of the first businesses I started was a candle manufacturing business. Okay, and we supplied restaurants. And the one restaurant in particular, I was really looking at breaking into this chain, and it was Ocean Basket. And I tried everything in terms of differentiating myself from my two primary competitors who were also who was also chasing that same customer. In fact, one of them already landed that deal. And what I just decided to do in a last attempt to just win that customer over was drop my price. And I dropped it almost at cost. And what I did is when I dropped that price, I got such a big name because Ocean Basket is a highly reputable business, and I use them as a testimonial to get businesses from other Ocean Basket stores and other big brands, because I could now show that a big brand like Ocean Basket trusted our quality to provide their candles. What is your excuse? What is your reason? So that worked for me, not only to get into that chain, but also to get into other chains that are just as big, that are just as established. So that worked for me. In other cases, if you're looking at a company like Capitec, who kind of came in, disrupted the big four, they kind of followed a penetration strategy where they're offering a high quality service from a banking perspective, but it's much cheaper. What they force the other competitors to do is to drop and start the price war. So you have Standard Bank that has also come in now, and they kind of offering the 7 Rand MIMO accounts or the 9 Rand MIMO accounts to kind of compete with customers at that level. And that is because their strategy was so effective, they forced the big four to kind of compete at that level. Now, those are fantastic opportunities for customers to take advantage of, but it's not always a good thing for businesses, because if you're competing to price, or if you're competing at price, it's a race to the bottom. And the last quadrant is what is called skimming. This is where you have a moderate or low quality product, but it's sold at an extremely high price. And this is only based on the fact that the laws of demand and supply now count in your favor. So if there's a high demand for something and there's a very limited supply, and you hold the cards from a supply perspective, you can charge whatever you want. If you know that you are selling, let's say, bread, and I know it's a bad example because the price of bread is fairly well controlled because it's a staple food item, but there's such a high demand for it, and you're the only shop within a 50-kilometer radius, and you decide you're going to charge 100 Rand instead of the recommended price, which is 18 Rand or 20 Rand. So you're 5xing your selling price, and people still feel it's cheaper to spend 100 Rand on bread instead of paying 200 Rand for petrol just to buy a bread that costs 20 Rand, then you would then fall into that bracket. So based on who your clientele is will also determine what type of pricing quadrant you can implement in this business. And the last thing I would add, and this is something I did my earlier years in business, when you don't know what to charge, and you've taken all of these things into account, and you're still left at the point where customers are still complaining either about the price or about the quality or about the speed, you give them the pricing triangle. Now, what is the pricing triangle? The pricing triangle speaks to three components of your price and what it is built on. So the first component is obviously the cost or the price. In other words, what do the customers pay for this product? The second thing is the quality. And the third one is the speed. And tell the customer they can have two of the three. So if they want a good price and they want it immediately, you're going to compromise on quality. If they want good quality at a good price, it's going to happen sometime next year when you have the time to focus on a low priority client. Or if they want good quality, but they want it immediately, it's going to cost them. So tell them they can have two of their three. I know pricing is something that a lot of people struggle with, especially if you're someone with a background like I had, where I watched my parents look at the newspaper, look at the pricing, and constantly complaining how expensive things are, and saying it over and over and over again when monies was scarce. And by the time I started my own business, and I had to give that price, I would always go into my shop and say, you can just give me a 500 Rand, even though what I'm offering is worth 2,000 Rand. We undermine ourselves like that. I would highly suggest you implement some of these strategies to ensure that you don't undermine yourself, you deliver your price confidently, based on research, based on what your competitors are charging, how you are different, and justify. And in a different podcast, we're going to talk justification about the value of the product. Okay, so if you got value from today's episode, send us a like, send us an email if you'd like the notes of today's show, and we'll gladly pass that on to you. Until next week, same time, same place, goodbye, and God bless.